Afternoon, Kelly.
Afternoon. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Monday, August 31st meeting of the Common Council Public Safety Committee. I am the chair, Kelly Kimbrough. For the record, committee members Hoey, Ballerin, Frederick are here. Also present are Councilmember Conti, Jenny Farrow. I'm sorry, Joe. I see you there, buddy. Committee member, also Joe Igo. I'm sorry, Joe. That's, okay. Jenny Farrow, along with our staff, Danielle Gillespie, Michelle Andre, and JL Pichardo, along with Corp Counsel Brett Williams, and present from APD, we have Commanders Foley and Deputy Chief Donahue. Thank you all for being here. So we are here to discuss Ordinance 158120. It's an ordinance amending Part 2 of the Code of the City of Albany by enacting a new chapter 325 titled Surveillance Technology. We'll also be discussing the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force afterwards. So what I'll do is I'll start with the sponsor, Ms. Frederick. You want to speak to the legislation?
Thank you, Kelly. So everyone, this is in regards to surveillance technology and facial recognition technology being used or potential to use in the city. This has been an emerging technology we've seen across the nation in which individuals' facial features are used and ran against data sets to determine whether or not, for example, in policing, a person could be identified as a suspect or a criminal in some cases. So essentially what this legislation is doing is making it so any city department that is currently using facial recognition technology or will plan to use it in the future has to report on certain metrics. And the reason for this reporting requirement is so that we are involved as the city's legislative body in the process, as well as we're able to determine whether or not the costs outweigh or do not outweigh the benefit, and if the technologies themselves disproportionately affect communities of color and other disproportionately marginalized groups. So I'll stop there, see if there's any questions.
So go ahead. Now I'm gonna, if no committee members or council members have questions, I'll let the folks from APD speak.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for inviting us to this meeting tonight. I know Ms. Fredericks, we spoke about this a few months ago about this legislation, and we understand your concerns, and we'd like to work with everyone to address any concerns that you may have in relation to any of the technologies that we use. You mentioned in your brief that the objective of this, and this is just what I gathered from your statements, the objective of this is for the facial recognition piece. Your concerns about facial recognition and some of the other issues that you feel come with that technology. Our position with this litigation or this law is that it seems to be very overly broad, in the sense that it doesn't only apply to facial rec, the way this is written. This seems to apply to every piece of surveillance technology that we have, all the way from our desktop computers that have the capability of viewing the street cams, all the way to various other technologies that we use for surveillance. So it just seems very overly broad. So we're concerned how we're going to practically, if this law was to move forward, how would we practically put this, be able to comply with the law and be able to function practically under these parameters of this law. This goes far beyond the facial recognition technology. It goes, like I said, it goes well beyond that, and it would seriously hamper our ability to investigate crimes and address the current violence going on in our city. The camera system, I mean, in many of our cases, for example, in many of our shooting cases, video technology and video surveillance and other means are a huge asset to us, because unfortunately many people do not cooperate with us in those investigations. So the video evidence that we have, whether it's from a private establishment or from the city cameras, is a huge asset to us and allows us to find out what happened, who was involved, and come to a successful prosecution in some of these cases. So we are, I mean, the way this is written, we have some serious concerns, and respecting everybody's time, you know, I'd be glad to go into further details with Commander Foley, but just with that being said, that's just my brief summary of what our concerns are on here. So, you know, I'd like to hear what your response is as far as those concerns and what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. So a few responses to what you said there. So the definition of facial recognition technology has definitely been evolving, because this is a new technology, and you know, each month I feel like there's a new definition about what it entails. So that's something that I, along with our research council, we're looking to better define so that it's not as broad as you're indicating there, because we really want to hone in on the use of the technology and make sure that people are reporting on such use. The other component is, I just want to make it clear that this is not by any means saying that you can't use the technology. It's purely adding a level of transparency to the legislative body and the City of Albany residents. So something we'll further modify for sure. And I would like to have that collaboration as well with you in terms of, you know, making sure we do something that's achievable.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's all we ask, is that, you know, we can work collaboratively. The facial recognition technology that you're referring to, and some other cities, I know they have the capabilities to do that. We don't use. There's none of our camera systems have that ability to track or to recognize somebody's facial features or biometrics based on the surveillance cameras that we have in the city. So none of that technology is in place right now. Any surveillance technology to that effect. So we just ask that we have some further discussions on this, so we can hone in on exactly what your concerns are, and maybe work together so that way it doesn't hamper because as this reads right now, like I said, I can't stress that enough. As this is written right now, it's extremely broad, and it affects every piece of our video and audio technology that we currently use. And some of the technologies that we use, unfortunately, I understand your goal of transparency, but with some of these cases, they're very law enforcement sensitive. So we also have to have discussions about that, where there are some cases where we would not be able to get, it would legally be inappropriate and probably illegal for us to get other approvals to use some of these technologies involving, and it involves a larger case. And depending on that case, that there could be implications, legal implications with us sharing that information with any non-law enforcement. So that's just another consideration that we need to discuss as we move forward in our discussions.
Yep, understood. And I'll also note for everyone on the line, we did receive Corporation Council comments regarding legislation, some recommended updates that we'll be working collaboratively with, along with the police department, as well as with the police reform committee that was formed, and how they're meeting and talking about different reforms that they'd like to see in policing in Albany. This is something that, you know, I'm not looking for it to be rushed. I really want to make sure that we have everyone who should be at the table involved in this, and get their inputs as well from the community perspective. So I would like to loop in that committee that was formed as well to see what their thoughts are on this.
Thank you, Ms. Frederick. Any committee members have questions or comments? Mr. Hoey.
Chief, I listened to what you said, and you know, this technology is so new, and we're setting the groundwork for what's going to come down in the future. So we don't have these cameras today, but we're moving to that point. And even the New York State driver's license pictures can be, in some instances, you can track a citizen walking around or wherever they are, wherever they show up in camera, using the spatial technology. So, technology is a double-edged sword. It has benefits, but it has problems. And I know we're looking to arrest, criminals and stuff, but at what price are we doing an ordinary citizen going around their daily task? How much are we going to be following them? And I worry, and I know it sounds kind of off the wall, but lately it's not off the wall to me about if we become a police state where, our freedoms and stuff become impinged. And I know it sounds like out there, but we do see a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, we do got to get crime under control, but we got to worry about the freedoms that, the Constitution guarantees all the people that live in our country. So, I mean, I'm glad that Sonia is going to work with you and try to, narrow down the definition that we can use this technology. But, I just Googled right at the beginning of the meeting about concerns about this type of technology. And I mean, I got pages and pages, American Civil Liberties Union, other people talking about this. And we can look at, if you look at Great Britain, where you're on camera all over the place, but that's actually, even though it's democracy, it is kind of, there is a queen there and stuff like that. So I'll end it at that, but I do have concerns and I'm glad we can work this out. Thank you.
Any,
Kelly, if I could just say a word.
yes.
So we do have a facial recognition agreement with the Crime Analysis Center currently. However, we do not use any facial recognition surveillance. There is no camera that we have that is able to track a face through the city, anything along those lines. What we are able to do currently is we're able to take a still shot of a potential suspect that has to be almost in pristine condition, straight face on. We're able to enter it into a system which is managed by New York, New Jersey, HIDTA. And HIDTA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And basically what that allows us to do, it allows us access to PIMS, which is Photographic Imaging Mugshot System. And any of our current pictures that we enter into, they're only get compared against mugshots that are New York, housed by this system. And then in return, we would get a possible hit. That hit has to be investigated. It is not probable cause for an arrest. It does not bring us to the level of arrest. It has to be validated, and then it's just an investigative lead at this point. So we do have some facial recognition capabilities, and the way that this, much like the chief said, much the way this is written, I believe this is written more towards the facial surveillance technology that allows you to track people through the crowd type stuff. We currently do not utilize that. And as the chief said, and if we'd like to sit down and hammer out, figuring out if that is in the future and setting limitations if that's possible. So, but I just wanted to clarify what we currently do as opposed to what this law makes reference to. So.
Thank you, Commander. And so could you tell us how much investigative work or how many steps would have occurred by the point where you're putting that picture in the computer to compare it? You know what I mean? How, it's not where you start off. How many steps?
How many steps before we put that picture in to compare it? Well, usually, a lot of times, the picture has to be, there has to be actually, obviously, the initial response to the scene, interview the witnesses, development of a possible suspect, that if at all. Then we go out and we do a video canvas or a canvas of some sort, and we come up with video. Then the video has to be reviewed. And if we develop the suspect or a picture of the suspect off of the video, then we look at the video for imaging and decide whether we have a good enough shot, straight on, not straight on. Sometimes before we even do the facial recognition, we'll send that video or that picture out on a bulletin to other law enforcement agencies, including probation, parole, and the other agencies in the area, to see whether anybody will first recognize that party that way. And then if we're at the end of an investigative and we have no other options,
then we'll put it into a facial recognition and see if we get any hits. Sometimes that's done on a more accelerated basis, depending on how good the shot is when it first comes in, and the obviously the nature of the crime. We have used this process to do several things. We have used it to identify a victim of a car accident, a fatal car accident, which we had no ID on him. We had no way to identify him. We attempted to identify him through facial recognition. I don't recall whether we were successful in trying to get him identified. We wanted to let his family know. There was another instance, and we spoke with this with Ms. Frederick the last time we spoke, where we had a bank robbery suspect in custody. He was stopped just a few blocks away from a bank robbery. He was sitting in our interview room, and we put the picture in facial recognition, and it came back to another guy. And then we were able to verify that the guy was in fact in the area. He was the suspect, and the guy was let out of the interview room, and he was exonerated of his crime as a result of facial recognition. So we use it in various ways. It's not used very widely by us. In fact, of all the cases we worked in 2019, we only used it for 36 incidents. Out of that, we got 14 possible hits. And this year so far, we've used it 32 times. So it's not a very widely used investigative lead or a very investigative process that we utilize, but it is a tool that we have.
And if there's a strict policy, like the commander said, this is a state program. So this comes out of all the CRACs, and this is a statewide program, a policy that they put in effect. So there's strict guidelines. It's going through various levels of approval throughout the state, and it's something that they take very seriously. We met as an executive committee with the CACs. This has been approved all around the state. The policy that they use for that type of facial recognition technology that the commander spoke about.
And just to reiterate, this is not the facial surveillance technology. This is a stagnant still photo facial rec against a known database of mugshots. So.
Thank you, Commander Foley.
Kelly?
We have, Joe Igo, then Richard Conti, and then Ms. Frederick.
I had a question. This is a pretty lengthy piece of legislation. I was wondering if you got it from some other municipality, and if so, which ones? Have you talked to them at all? What kind of issues they've had? What kind of problems? How they've worked theirs out? And maybe the chiefs would know also. I don't know if the state police use it, the FBI locally, the ATF that we work with. So these are some of the questions that I had.
I believe that question was for Ms. Frederick.
Yeah, so I'll jump in here. So when this has been months in the making, I'll say, and when this was originally brought up, we did try to mirror similar cities that have this implemented. Now, I just want to let everyone know that what we're not calling for here is an outright ban of the technology. There have been cities that have done that. San Francisco, Oakland, Cambridge, like these cities have fully banned the use of facial recognition technology. Here, this is more so of trying to let the police department and other departments that intend on future use still continue, however, have strict protocols in place and strict reporting in place around that, so it doesn't get to the point of Councilmember Hoey's comment out of hand and sort of not in our control. So to go back to your original question, Joe, we did use Boston legislation as a example for when we were crafting this. However, we are going to look back at that to make sure that we update language to specify more so the facial recognition technology, really narrow down on what we're really aiming for here.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Conti?
Okay, thanks. Just a quick question. Does this impact any type of technology outside of the APD, or is all of the technology that we're talking about solely used by the APD?
So as written, because it is a little bit broader, there is potential for it to impact some other departments. including parking authority, the City of Albany itself. However, when we narrow that down, we're going to have a better representation of what departments it will actually affect. But Mr. Conti, I do want to state that if you follow the national trends of the technology use, we are seeing some school districts at a national level using this technology as well. So Albany School District right now in its current state does not, but this would be legislation in place for future use if any other departments do intend on expanding it and using the technology.
Okay. Does Corp Counsel know if this impacts, what the impact might be outside of the APD?
Well, one other city entity that we think this probably would impact to a certain degree is the water department. You know, they have cameras and conduct some surveillance around the city's water supply and things like that. And that was one concern that we pointed out to JR and to Ms. Frederick, was that the definitions and the way the statute is phrased doesn't really state whether it applies only to city entities explicitly. So, you know, we had the concern that it could potentially be read to include other non-city entities that may conduct surveillance within the city.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah, and I'm wondering how it might apply to, if it might apply to authorities that are not directly under the city control, since they are established under state law, such as the water authority or the parking authority.
yeah, as written, I think it would apply to those.
Okay. If the law department has submitted specific written comments, can those be shared with members?
As far as my office is concerned, absolutely. I emailed those to JR on Friday, so he has my okay to distribute those to the rest of the membership.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Frederick, I believe you're up. Did you have something else?
I guess something I'd like to just include in this conversation is I definitely don't want to have this come off as discrediting the good work that it's doing, right? Like the police department brought up some very good uses of the technology. However, there is a importance in this technology that I think we all need to be aware of, in that the technology currently in its current state is not fully developed to the point where it can distinguish between a person of color or someone with traditional facial features. Similarly, a woman who has softer facial features, studies have reported that the technology itself could lead to a false positive. So that's where I think it's really important that we really are collaborative in revising this and bringing it to the table, because obviously technologies will advance, technologies will get better as time grows, but many studies have shown right now that it disproportionately affects marginalized groups. And that's where I think we need to put this forward in addition with the other metrics that will be included in the reporting to make sure that that's not happening in the City of Albany.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to again reemphasize that there's, for the technology, facial recognition technology that the commander spoke about, there are a lot of protections in place to address. And as we speak further in a collaborative, as a collaborative group, we can show you guys and go through the policy with you. But there's a lot of protections in there, and just the fact that these are just investigative leads, and no one is being arrested as a result of these identifications. It's just one of those protections that are in these policies. And I also want to draw attention to, I think we're confusing, or we're kind of lumping all the technology into one thing. It sounds like the city of Boston, as you're referring to, I read some of the material out of Boston, and I believe in that one article that they wrote, they were referring to cameras that have the capability, surveillance cameras that are out and open in the public, have the capability of using facial rec and tracking individuals. That technology is different from the technology that we're speaking of with the facial recognition, and as far as how it's being used. So I think they're two separate things, and obviously I see the concern with that technology, where if I can put a camera up out in public and monitor people and identify people using facial rec, I understand the concern there, but that's far different than what we're using with the technology, with the facial recognition in the center that we're using. I think they're two separate things. And again, this legislation affects all of our technology, so it's very broad. So again, I look forward to the future collaboration and conversation. We can go through all of this with you and hopefully come to some type of consensus.
Ms. Farrell, I'd also like to recognize Chief City Auditor Dorothea Clear. She's joined us.
I just wanted to say, so I'm aware there's some incredible podcasts about, I think, the dangers that Councilmember Frederick is concerned with, which is completely not what you guys are doing when you describe that. There's actually, the big issues came from pilot programs with, I believe Amazon had one and Google had one. And depending on where the software was created, so the one, I don't remember which one, one was created in Asia and was great at identifying Asian people, but not so great at any other ethnicity. And another one was created in a very Caucasian area, so it was great at identifying Caucasian people, but this technology uses social media, like all sorts of different things. And it is literally just out on the street, and there's a lot of dangers that are with it. So I appreciate Councilmember Frederick bringing this up and everybody being willing to work together to make sure that those dangers that have happened in other places don't happen here.
Kelly?
Mr. Igo, yep. Go ahead.
I hate this virtual stuff, you know that. I can't wait till we get back together, and I would like to see a hands-on thing what the police department, Albany Police Department uses now. And that's very hard to do over a screen like this, I think. So if that opportunity ever arises, I'd like to partake in it. That's it, thanks.
Okay, and so I would say, based on Ms. Frederick's, your willingness to work on this, that we just hold it in committee until we get to have those discussions. I'd like, if at all possible, to be a part of them, if you guys make arrangements to do that. And then we'll have the discussion, or you can have the discussion, and we'll come back here and have another discussion before passing it out. Does that
Absolutely.
sound good, Ms. Frederick? Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. All right. So that's that part of our agenda. Thank you, Chief and Commander. And obviously, with the violence prevention, you're welcome to stay and weigh in on the conversation for that. So for the second part of this, and I know the meeting notice that went out says gun violence prevention task force. It was supposed to be violence
was amended.
Right. Okay. Violence prevention task force. I probably have no copy of it that I'm reading off of. So and that violence prevention task force is a part of the equity agenda under the violence prevention section. So this is a discussion on moving forward with that, and just based on the actual legislation, I'll read through it just real quickly. Common Council Public Safety Committee will establish a violence prevention task force. The violence prevention task force will be responsible for convening stakeholders every fall to develop action items in preparation for the upcoming summer in anticipation of an uptick in violence. Task force will be composed of members of the Albany Common Council Public Safety Committee, community members from wards disproportionately impacted by violence, at least one youth representative, representatives from the Albany Police Department, the mayor's office, the school district, clergy, and members from violence prevention related organizations. Um, I'll stop right there. So the discussion, let the discussion begin. There's some components in here, calls for a budget line and some funding and whatnot in the report. So maybe, if you don't mind, Dr. Pliers, you're here. Why don't we open with you, since you were the sponsor of this when you were a council member before? You want to give us your thoughts before we head into the discussion?
Thank you so much, Councilman Kimbrough. I actually would like to hear what if there are any questions or concerns, and then I'm in a position to best respond.
Okay. Okay. So we'll establish field preparation. Okay, I guess there's some clarity. So, for instance, the Violence Prevention Task Force will be responsible for convening stakeholders every fall. How are we adding? And again, it's probably just a public safety meeting and pulling folks into it. The stakeholders every fall to develop action items in preparation for upcoming uptick in violence. Task force will be composed of. So again,
Kelly, can I
yeah.
ask a question on that part? Maybe because the language might be a little bit unclear, and maybe I'm misreading. I sometimes read it as the task force will be convene stakeholders different than the individuals who comprise the task force, or is the task force comprised of the stakeholders?
The latter, Richard. The
Okay.
the task force is comprised of a variety of stakeholders.
Okay.
Right. So, like, yeah, we had the meeting last year. We, as a body, the Public Safety Committee invited people to the table. We got around, discussed that. That is the task force.
And not necessarily those players, but that was the concept, Councilman Kimbrough, is when we brought stakeholders from education. The Superintendent Kawita Adams was there, the principal at Green Tech, Jerome from 518 SNUG. So the diversity of the minds at the table, that is a great example of the variety of stakeholders that was envisioned for the Violence Prevention Task Force. And then I'll just add, everyone kept saying, what about the youth? The youth are not represented at the table. And so that's why that language was explicit about making sure that there is at least one youth representative.
Okay. Right, and so we convene, we pull folks in. It seems simple enough. Any thoughts from, we'll say, committee members first? Okay, yeah, I see you, Tom. Go ahead.
One of the things I'm concerned about, and I just got hit with it on Friday, was that the schools now in Albany are going to go totally virtual. And kids are going to be staying home, and especially the ages that they're going to make it totally virtual, is grade 7 through 12. And I have a deep concern, so I think it's important to bring the school district back in. I'm upset because I have a child that I want to go to school, I know that there's a COVID danger, but this is being done not because of COVID, but because they don't have money. And we got to do something. And I don't know. I mean, well, I do know we need to really push for maybe putting out a bond or something that we can maintain our schools, because we don't want kids out on the street. I mean, that's the bottom line. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ballerin.
I was gonna say the one thing that I liked about that group of people is that we brought people that had resources to the table, because it takes resources to get a lot of these initiatives going. So it was individuals that had programs, people from the clergy, because at the end of the day, it's everybody doing their little piece that has been what kept our community together. And I think a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, because a lot of these programs have not been able to be fulfilled because of COVID, that we're seeing these issues. So I think it's a good idea. I'd like to see it as a monthly initiative, monthly meeting, so that it's constantly on the foresight, because I think it's good even in the middle of the summer when these programs are running to see what's working, what's not, and if there's certain stakeholders that need support, to be able to be there to support them, and to be able to be there to have each other's back. So I look forward to see this move forward, and my recommendation is that it should be a monthly meeting, and we should look at all the stakeholders to be a part of it, especially the ones that have resources.
Kelly? I go along with Alfredo there. I don't know if monthly, but at least quarterly. And I have a concern about all the different groups meeting and different things right now. Some of these people that were involved last year, it was a great group, okay? Now, I don't know if they're being involved in this. They're involved with some of the other meetings that are going on, these other committees, you might say. I'm just, I don't want people not fighting against each other, but struggling to do everything, So we have this task force, then we have the gun violence task force we're putting together. That's my concern. It's just, we can't be all over the place with the same people.
Is there a gun violence task force?
Well, aren't we trying to get that going again?
No. I just corrected in the beginning that I keep conflating the two when I keep saying gun violence, but it's just this one. Okay. Yeah, it's just this one. And I happen to agree. We'll reconvene the folks. And the thing is, we had that emergency meeting a couple of weeks ago. I think, and through discussion with some of the old stakeholders, they would have attended had it not been such short notice. We did like a 3 or 4 day turnaround. So I think we would have seen a lot more folks had it was a quick turnaround and a Friday. And so maybe that played into it. So in the equity agenda, in the legislation, it doesn't, and we can determine this, it doesn't determine who's going to decide on the chair. So we would naturally think that the group would decide on the chair. How would, what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Clears?
Yes, that would be up to how the council sees fit, in particular, the Public Safety Committee sees fit to structure that. So typically, and given the nature of the stakeholder group, the idea is to have a grassroots feel to the group, because those are the folks who are on the ground in the trenches doing the work. And so instead of a traditional, we choose who leadership should be, I thought that it would be best to leave it open so that organically, if there were some, depending on who you select to be a part of this, there may organically be some leaders that you think should chair it, and it not necessarily be an elected official or someone who has a official title, to break down those barriers in terms of hierarchy, and understanding that those closest to the street doing the work they should have a leadership role in this.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
And I just wanted to clarify the name change. Initially, it did say gun violence prevention task force. The mayor actually suggested that we take gun out because when the legislation was being drafted, we had quite a few stabbings. And so her concern was that if we kept the gun piece in, that it would be so narrow when in fact we have so many different types of violence happening in the city. And at that time we had a lot of stabbing. So that's why it was opened up to be violence prevention, not just guns specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, and that way it's all encompassing. So also, we don't have a request for a report. Is the idea for there to be a report generated? I mean, it's not in here, so I'm assuming it's not, but just asking.
No, the idea was more so for this body to create recommendations and strategies for how to address the issue, the violence issue that happens every summer. So not necessarily any reporting to any specific group. And since the council was, members of the council would be a part of this, I didn't think it made sense for this group to do a report for the council, but more so the recommendations that this group comes up with and the solutions would be shared with council members, the administration, the community at large.
Okay, thank you. So anyone from APD, you guys have any, Chief, Commander, any thoughts or any input?
Our thoughts are just, we want to, we think it's a good thing, and we'd like to participate and help out and work collaboratively as much as possible, because there's a lot of things going on out there, and I think there's many solutions and many things we can bring to the table to help solve some of these issues, and we're happy to participate in any way you guys need us or see fit.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And then just we talk about the budget line. I mean, I know I mean, we got a lot of stuff going on now financially. The city does, but that aside, for now and for the future, I mean, what would and this is just general to everyone, not just Dr. Please, but when you're talking about trying to, adding a budget line and putting some funding aside to deal with this, do we have any idea of ballpark or ideas for funding for something like this? And of course, it would be based on what the group comes up with, what kind of initiatives or recommendations, excuse me, the group would come up for how to prevent this violence. And it could be programming, it could be programs or what have you, to deal with this. So thoughts?
If I could just clarify that, and I spoke with David, the mayor's office is supposed to allocate a budget for the this particular initiative, and I will say that is one of the oversights and things that I will own in terms of one of the challenges with the legislation as is. At the time, there was no concrete dollar figure mentioned. And when you look at other equity packages across the country, they are very particular about money set aside and the amount of money. Because of our funding challenges as a city, I didn't want to box the city into a specific amount of funding. And so when I was in conversation with the mayor's office about the funding and where it would come from, she had some ideas, and this was, again, when we were talking about drafting the legislation. Fast forward, I just spoke to David, and he said, oh, we're on it. we will have something ready to present as part of the budget, the money allocated for the initiative. So this may be, and I thought David would potentially be on the call. This conversation, I think, should happen in conjunction with either the budget office or at least David, because they are already spinning their wheels about the allocation of the funding. The other thing I'll add is that the idea was that the Violence Prevention Task Force would lead the community through a process in which the community decides, with support from the Violence Prevention Task Force, how the money is spent. So funding current initiatives that are already on the ground doing the work. And so instead of the council saying this where the money is where the money should go, or the administration, it is very much a grassroots level process for deciding which organizations should get funded to continue the work that they're already doing.
Okay, thank you for that. And actually with the work that's being done right now on police reforms, that can inform this process and kind of weave into it when you talk about, you know, not defunding the police, but reallocating funding or moving it around to take care of different parts or different issues that we have here in the city. That can be a part of that. So, any
Kelly, it's just my Darcy. A
Yeah.
question for you: where did the funding come for the police department audit? $80,000. Was that budgeted, or did that come from through E&A or what?
So are we done with this agenda item?
It's kind of tied together, the finances of it. You started getting on finances for the other. I'm just curious if you go the same route as you did for the audit.
So if we're done, I'm happy to answer that question for you, Joe. Are we done with this?
No, well, what I guess at this point, since we kind of had a little bit of discussion, anyone have anything else to add? If you don't, what we're gonna do is, I think the logical thing to do would be to pull some of those old, you know, reach out to the old stakeholders, try to get them involved in this process and ask them, you know, to be a part of this and have that discussion to try to build this team.
And try to get some youth in there.
Right, and get youth in there. And then if we make the context, have the conversations, and we can follow up with another public safety meeting to kind of refine that and put it all together. That's going to be my suggestion at this point. Two hands. Mr. Hoey was first, and then Mr. Ballard.
Yeah, I am kind of concerned, and I'm going to be honest. And it's difficult. I don't want to seem like, you know, the balloon or bubble breaker. I'm very concerned about, with number one, the leadership, where, well, we'll try to figure it out. I think going into this that there should be, and I'm not looking for the council to lead, but we should have a rough idea who's going to lead this task force. Just to leave it kind of loosey-goosey, well, we'll figure it out as we go. We'll build the plane as we're flying. I'm very nervous about it. The other thing I'm worried about is the no report. I would like to see something come out of this. If people miss a meeting or not involved, you know, other council members, they can't make it. It would be nice to have some kind of like report with the recommendations. I just get nervous when I say, well, we'll all kind of know. Again, I think we need to have something that's more structured, and that's my humble opinion. Thank you.
Right. So you under one, are you talking about meeting minutes, as you know, for each meeting that's had, that we should have minutes to kind of show where we are?
No, what I'm looking for is at the end of this task force and we should have how long is this going to last? What's the timeline we're looking at? So let's say we're going to be done by April or June, whatever. At the end of that time, we're putting a lot of effort and energy into this. What comes out of it? What recommendations comes out? What items did we discuss? I mean, it doesn't have to be down to, you know, nitty gritty, but there should be a general overview of what we discussed, what we came up with, especially, this is like a historical document that moving into the future, if we ever have to do this again, that we'll be able to do it. Now, I know there was a gun violence task force in 2008 or 9, and I've been asking around. Some people say they have that report, and I'm still trying to get my hands on it. But that's important that we can look what worked in the past, so we know in the future, what will work. Because what worked yesterday might not work today. But again, I'd like to see something a little bit more concrete. And again, I'm getting older, and I like to read reports, I guess. But thank you.
Right. Okay. And so for the you said a couple of things there, but for doing this, it's meant to take place, convening stakeholders every fall. So it's going to be an ongoing thing. And in terms of it escapes me. One more time, Tom. I can't even remember.
We should then, if it's going to be for the every fall we meet, we at some point we should come up with recommendations that we're going to try this year. So if they don't work, we know next year what not to do, or what to try different.
Right. I think it's going to be an organic and it's going to be dynamic. But
leadership was the other thing too.
Right. Yeah. That's it. Right. And so for the leadership thing, I'll have Michelle reach out to the prior stakeholders. If you'd like, I can speak to every one of them, have a conversation, and ask them to participate. And once they agree or not, what we end up with, we'll come back to the Public Safety Committee, and we can discuss adding members or not to the mix.
I got one more fast question.
Is that sufficient?
Well, I got one more question about, is Alice Green going to be involved at all? I mean, she'd be, in my mind, if she wants to be, she would be an excellent stakeholder. She's been doing this battle for as long as I've lived in Albany. I remember seeing her. So,
right, I agree with you 100%. And I believe when we had our meeting about the violence prior, that she was on that list or part of that group. But I can certainly, Michelle, will you add her to the list if she's not already on there, for us to reach out to get her participation in the group. I'm sorry, Mr. Ballerin, I know you've been waiting.
That's okay. It's good conversation. Nothing wrong with that. I was gonna say, I do think there should be some clear outcomes or clear expectations from the group. I do think it needs to be continuous. I think we too often are in our own little spheres, and we've got to put our arrogance to the side and realize that if we really want to make things better in our community, we need to maximize all of the resources that we have, and that is our schools, our city government, our county government, our police department, our recs, our clergy, our churches, our non-for-profits. We've got to be able to have one location or one entity where people come together and focus on this one issue. If we can't come together and talk about a lot of things, that's general. That's fine. I get it. But if we can come together, focus on this one issue and try to address this issue, because our neighbors are afraid to get out of their homes. And it affects all of us. And it affects all of us no matter what sphere of influence they're in. So I think it needs to be consistent. I think it needs to be something that we see as not a diet, but a life change. It's not something we do now just, because it's the time to do it. No, it's a life change. It's something we're going to be doing consistently, because even though we have years where you have ups and downs of violence, you still have violence. I can only think of 1 or 2 years in the last 10 years where we've had, limited homicides in our city. So, it has to be something where we change the mentality of all of these entities, and it's going to take time, that this is something that needs to be consistent, that we need to work together on this one issue, because if we fail, we all fail. It's not let's point the finger. No, it's all of us. It's all of us. It's all of our responsibility. If you want to be a stakeholder, And if you want to be in these positions, if you want to be, you know, if you want to head a non-for-profit, now you have a responsibility to the community that you serve. So I just want to make sure that we start creating that type of mentality, that this is a life change, not a diet, that we need to make sure we have clear outcomes, and that we're all in this together. We're either going to float together or we're going to sink together. And hopefully this will be the start of something, get us to better days.
Ms. Frederick?
Callie, you alluded to what I was going to ask after I rose my hand, but basically I was going to say that in addition to the prior stakeholders, we should look to bring in new members of the community, especially given the uptick we saw in crime this year. There might be new individuals that would have more insights or could bring more to the table in addition to the ones that were previously brought together for this.
Okay, thank you. And I would what I'd say is, or suggest is like Mr. Hoey suggested, Dr. Green, if members have an idea of a person that should be included in the stakeholders, please get it to Michelle. We have a pretty extensive list, and we would try to read it off, but we have to be in contact with these people, ask them to commit to do it. So we can't. But again, it's the this obviously APD, it's the Snugs, it's Lisa Good and her group. It's all the people that, and again, the easiest thing to do and the most sensible thing to do is grab and latch on to people as stakeholders that are already doing the work. You're not recreating the wheel and you're not pulling them out of their element. So again, I would imagine that a lot of folks that are already on the ground doing this work are going to be a part of this. And we quite often look for official channels and methods for handling these issues when we need a little bit of grassroots in there, because they know the offenders, they know the victims. So this is one of those instances where we're going to try to pull in as many community stakeholders as we can to be a part of this conversation, because it's sorely needed.
Councilman Kimbrough, I wanted to just say, and I want to be respectful of the fact that I recognize that I am not on the council, and so however the council, I want to respect the conversation that's happening and what you come up with. I will say, just from my experience convening the stakeholder group in the past, these are folks, movers and shakers. You have the superintendent. You have Jerome, who is hopping. He's in the streets. So this traditional meeting setting, consecutive meetings, that didn't work. And so we had to be creative to meet the needs of the people at the table. They weren't interested in long meetings because they have, so as I think Joe or somebody mentioned, they have a lot of things going on. So they wanted clear objectives about what we were there to achieve and come up with, and the legislation says action items for a reason. The focus is to come up with those action items and then get out the way so that they can implement. The other thing is, some of these individuals may or may not agree to do this again, but you can always ask them because they are involved in so many other things. But they made it very clear that they are not interested in the politics. They are here to do the work. And we set what I was intentional about doing is setting up the platform for us to convene and then get out of their way so that they could do the important work that they were already doing. So it was clear that they didn't want top heavy leadership from the council. They wanted their voices to lead, and they just needed support from the council.
Thank you for that. So with that, if no one else has anything, we'll move to adjourn.
Joe had a question for me, Kelly, about the.
Oh, yes, about the audit. That's right.
Yes. So Joe, your question was where are the funds coming from?
Yeah, $80,000 was for the audit.
Yep, so the audit is $80,000. So I do have a budget line for an external audit within my budget. So
Okay. I said, I didn't know, I know you had funds for audit. I thought they were more internal. I didn't know about external like that.
when you say internal,
Well, within the city, departments and this and that.
well, in the past, the audit office has consistently hired external firms to conduct the fiscal audit that happens every year. That's not done in-house.
Right, or
So-
whatever, yeah.
So those funds have been allocated in the past specifically for an external audit firm to conduct an audit of, in the past, the city's fiscal status.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Clears. If no one has anything further, move to adjourn.
Aye.
Okay, all right. Meeting adjourned. All right, thanks everyone. Be safe.
Take care, everybody.
Take
Have a
care.
good night, everybody.
Be careful.
Have a good night.
Good night.